With housing prices and interest rates on the rise, is it still a good idea to buy a home in 2022? Generally, the answer is it depends on your situation. But there are some things in the 2022 market that might make it different or dangerous for you to buy a home. And so in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what those are. And then I'm going to give you some tips on how to determine whether your situation is a good situation to buy a home in. So let's jump into it. Hey, what's up guys? I'm Ben Sund. Welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome for the first time. We don't just talk about impending market crashes. I also talk about things like personal finance, investing, and real estate. So if you're interested in those things, please hit that big red subscribe button. So for those of you that don't know me, I've been in the mortgage industry for about 10 years now. I started in 2013. And without fail, one of the biggest questions I get is, should I buy a home in X year, whatever year it is? In 2013, when I started, people were asking, should I buy a home? It's 2013. The housing market was still on the rebound from 2008, so people were skeptical of what was going to happen. And then in 2015, the housing prices seemed really high compared to 2008 and 2013, and so I was getting that same question. People were really skeptical. And then in 2018, when I bought the home that I'm in now, it appraised for $80,000 more than what it would have in 2015. And in 2019, the interest rates were as high as they are now. I only say all of that to say this: the people that bought throughout those different time periods are better off now than they were then, meaning that their home prices went up and they have more equity in the home. And you're probably sitting there thinking, man, I'd rather have any one of those scenarios than what we have now because we have high home prices and high interest rates. So let's first talk about what's happening in the market that's causing this and why it might be dangerous for you to buy a home. So the first reason, and I know you guys are sick of hearing it, is that it's inflation. The Fed has increased the federal bond rate. Now, that has also impacted the mortgage interest rate. Those two don't go hand in hand. So if the federal bond rate goes up 1%, it doesn't necessarily mean that the mortgage interest rate will go up 1%. But in this case, the Fed had to increase the bond rate, and so the mortgage interest rates also went up. Now, historically, the interest rates are really still very, very low. If you look back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and really up until 2009, the interest rates were well over 5%. And most of those decades, they were well over 6%. So a slightly higher interest rate right now, again, we're in the 5%. So I'm not going to quote a rate because it's kind of dependent on your situation. But we're in the 5% right now. That's slightly higher than what we were a couple of years ago. But again, in 2019, they're about the same. And people were still buying then. That alone wouldn't necessarily scare me away from buying a house, because there are other things that you can do, like paying your home down early, making extra principal payments. There are things that you can do to pay down the amount of interest that you're going to pay over time. But there are a few other things that you have to consider that might make it more dangerous to buy in this market. So one of the other things that you have to look at is that housing prices are really high. Again, I'm sure most of you that are out looking know this already, but one of the things that dictate housing prices are, and just like with any other economy or any other market, is supply and demand. But when you have a market where there are not enough homes and a ton of buyers, you have a stronger market, meaning that the home prices are not as likely to go down because you have so many people willing to buy. And in 2022, there are projected to be more home sales this year than there were last year, meaning that the purchase market is a lot stronger than it was last year even. It suggests that it's still okay to buy a home even though you're going to pay a little more for it. But these next 2 points would really discourage me from buying a home, and they can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. And the first one is home inspection and appraisal discouragement. And what I mean by that is when you're going to make an offer on a home, oftentimes sellers won't accept your bid if you want to get a home inspection or an appraisal. This to me is absolutely ridiculous. You as a buyer should be able to get a home inspection and an appraisal. And if you're going through a lender is going to require that you get an appraisal, because as a lender, we're not going to lend on a property without seeing the value of that property. We're not just going to go by the listing price of the home. These are very dangerous. And this isn't just pertaining to this market, but these are very dangerous because with a home inspection, it's going to tell you the potential issues, the livability issues of the home, meaning they're going to look at like the water supply, the sewer septic system, heating, cooling, big things like structure and roofing, things like that that are going to tell you if the home is in good repair or any potential repairs that the home might need. Home inspections are important for the obvious reasons that it's going to tell you what's wrong with the home. And you can't just take the word of the seller and the real estate agent to tell you what's wrong with the home. There are seller disclosures that are on the contract, but there are often things that aren't disclosed in the contract or aren't known about unless you have someone go in there, like a home inspector, go in there and look at the property for you, kind of be your eyes. They're professionals, they know what they're doing. They can be your eyes and tell you, hey, this might need a new water system soon, or this structural is looking a little iffy. You might need to get a structural inspection, things like that. In this market, sellers are discouraging them, or listing agents are discouraging them, because it can inhibit the amount of time that it takes to purchase a home. Meaning it can take like a week to get one of those back. And so you might not be able to close until you get that back. And if there are things wrong with the home, it could mean that you back out on the house and they have to try to find a new buyer. So they're discouraging that you get one of those, and it's only a benefit to them. It's not a benefit to you. Now, I have had some horror stories in my 10 years as a lender. For instance, one guy that I know bought a home. He didn't get an inspection on it. And when he was doing some remodeling, and again, this isn't on the seller, this isn't on the listing agent, they wouldn't have known about these things. But under the drywall, there was a huge mold problem, and it was going to be about $25,000 to $30,000 in mold remediation. And this might not be something that a home inspector might have even caught. You don't know. Sometimes you can smell mold. It might take like a trained nose, someone that's been in a lot of properties to be able to detect something like that. But these home inspections are a layer of protection to help you make a better buying decision. And then the other one is an appraisal. Again, if you're working through a bank, a lender is going to require that you get an appraisal because they need to estimate the value of the home. But we are seeing sellers and listing agents that are trying to negotiate that you don't get an appraisal, meaning you don't know the actual value of the home, so you don't know if you're making a good purchasing decision. And the next point that we're going to talk about kind of couples into that, and that is they're requiring that you overbid, overpay, or you have an appraisal buffer or an appraisal guarantee. And so in this market, it's very common to where you're going to look at a home, you have 30, 40 other people that show up on the open house day. They're all submitting offers. You need to submit your offer within like an hour. It's got to be a very strong offer. And oftentimes you get in a bidding war. And that means that in my current market, a lot of these people are having to pay $30,000, $40,000, and $50,000 over the asking price for the home. Now, where this becomes a problem is that oftentimes the recent sales in the area aren't backing up that price. So let's say you go buy a home for $350,000, you get in a bidding war, and the price goes up to $400,000. Well, once we get an appraisal on the property, if that's allowed, once we get an appraisal on it, let's say it appraises for $350,000. That means that you have to come up with the extra $50,000 out of pocket. And that's where that appraisal buffer comes in, is that a lot of times in these contracts, the listing agent or the agents are negotiating that you guarantee that if the appraisal comes in $50,000 low, or however much low, it could be $10,000, $20,000, doesn't matter, however much low, that you cover that difference, and that's not going to kill the deal. Because a lot of times, if we get a low appraisal, it means that you either renegotiate or you back out, or you renegotiate, the seller comes down, or you back out of the deal. Well, in today's market, it's becoming where you have to guarantee that you're going to pay the difference to keep the loan together, which means that you're paying more for a home than what it's actually worth. This is where it becomes very, very dangerous, and almost guarantees that, it does guarantee that you're underwater immediately on the home, because the lender is only going to lend you money, let's say 5% down, 10% down, 20% down on the appraisal value of the home. So if you say started the negotiation at $350,000, it got bid up to $400,000, the lender's only going to lend you based on $350,000, so 5% down of $350,000. that means you have to come up with the $50,000 down plus the down payment and closing costs of the home. This is where it becomes very, very dangerous, and I would be very hesitant to get into one of these situations. Now, I know what most of you are saying. You're saying, in my area, I have to do that in order to buy a home, and I understand that. And I'm gonna give you some tips on what to look for to make sure that it's worth it for you to do that. Because in some situations, it might be worth it, but in a lot of situations, it might not. It's just going to depend, again, as I said earlier, on your situation and where you're looking at buying. So let's jump into some tips on how you can tell whether or not it's a good idea for you to buy a home and not just talk about theory and actually use it in practice. Don't buy too much house. I know this is kind of obvious, but there's a formula for it. And you want to look for, don't buy over 25 to 35% of your debt to income, meaning how much of your income is going towards debt each month. If you stay within the 25 to 35% ratio, that's going to give you extra money to where you can add to your savings, add to your emergency funds, pay extra on the mortgage every month in case you want to eliminate some of the added interest that you'd be paying over having a higher interest rate. I won't go into too much detail about this because I've explained it in other videos. Check out my mortgage playlist somewhere around up there. But I bring it up because mortgage lenders will approve you between 45 and 55% of your debt to income, meaning how much of your income is going towards debt each month. That's pre-tax. So 45% to 55% generally means that you're going to be in a position to be house poor. You don't want that in these scenarios where you might be paying more for a home. In markets where your home price is lower and you're not going to be underwater instantly on your house, you can go up to those higher debt to income ratios. I still don't really recommend it, but if you stick to the 25 to 35% ratio, that's going to give you more room again to save, to pay down your mortgage early if you need to, in case you have to buy a home for more than what it's actually worth at the time of purchase. So this next point is very, very important, and it's one of the main reasons why you should or shouldn't buy a home in 2022. And that is, talk to your realtor about the specific area that you're looking to buy in. Home purchases are very specific to the neighborhood or the area or the location that you're looking for. Again, location, 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 right? But what I mean by this is have your realtor look up population growth, job growth, and the type of jobs that are coming into your area. Have them look at average days on market in the last 3 to 5 years and look at how many homes have sold or the home sales prices in the last 3 to 5 years. Let me deep dive into job growth and population growth real quick for you. So population growth. Obviously, if you have an area where your population is growing, you're going to have a stronger housing market, generally speaking. If your population is shrinking, you're going to have a weaker market, generally speaking. So if you're in an area where your population is growing, that means long term, you're going to be better off as a homeowner than a renter. And to second that, look at job growth or the types of jobs coming into your area. This isn't to downplay or hate on anyone, but if you have a higher job growth of like minimum wage, restaurant jobs, those types of jobs, then they're typically going to be priced out of the market. If you have a population growth of like healthcare workers, IT, typically higher paying positions. Again, this isn't to hate on anyone. Minimum wage jobs are perfectly fine, but in a growing market, those jobs are going to be less likely to be able to be homeowners than jobs that are higher paying for obvious reasons, right? And so if you're in an area that has higher growth in like IT, healthcare, businesses coming in, then you're going to be in a stronger market to buy now because you could project that in 3 to 5 years with those jobs coming in, it's going to be a more competitive market. And that means that the house prices will generally go up over time. So it's a better idea to buy now than it would be to wait 3 to 5 years. And the third reason is look to buy if you're planning to keep the home for a long period of time or a longer or extended period of time. Meaning if you're planning to leave in the 3 to 5 year range, you probably shouldn't buy, you should plan on renting. As a general rule, home ownership over a long period of time is one of the best ways to grow your wealth and solidify your expenses each month. So if you plan to keep the home for 5 or 10 years, you'll have had equity in the home, and generally speaking, the home prices will have gone up. And if you bought within a growing market and you bought within an actual price range that you can afford, then generally speaking and historically, you're going to be in a much better position. Here's where it gets risky for a lot of people. If you have a growing family, or you're planning a family, or you're just out of college and you don't know exactly where you're going to be, and your life is going to change over time, you don't know what jobs you're going to take, then buying a house right now could be very risky for you. Because if you have to, let's say you graduate college, you get a job in your hometown, it pays pretty good, but you have a position where you could work out of state, making more money. Now you're going to have to sell your home in whatever market that we're in, and if it's within, say, 2 or 3 years, you could end up losing a bunch of money because the housing market could have dipped. All right, and the other option is look for your low down payment or down payment assistant programs. Utilize every one of those that you can get. This is going to be something that you're going to want to talk to your lender about. Generally speaking, they're going to be able to offer something like a 3% down conventional, 3.5% down FHA. Here's why I say this. Usually I recommend putting as much down as you possibly can. That's going to cut your interest rate, that's going to cut your payment. But in a market where you might have to overpay for a home, you want as much money as in your pocket as you possibly can get, because you want to be able to have a safety net and pay down as you go along. But in a time of uncertainty, if you have the money in the bank after you close and the home prices start to drop, and you've planned to, say, buy the home, again, in my other tips, you bought the home in the right price range, you bought the home in the right market, and you plan to buy long term, then if you have that money in your account, then you have leeway there to where you don't have to rush and you're not struggling to make the payments. And guys, the final tip is, and this isn't a mathematical secret or a mortgage secret or anything like that, it's a feeling thing. And it's back out if it doesn't feel right. You wouldn't believe how many people overbuy, or they get caught up in the sort of auction principles. And that is like, they get caught up in an auction and they're like, oh, I'm never gonna find a home like this ever again. This is my dream home. I need this home, so I'm gonna pay whatever I can, right? I see my kids out in the yard, I'm gonna pay whatever I can. Don't do that. That's not the market for this. You're gonna end up getting burnt. You're gonna end up hating the home, you're gonna end up paying, you're gonna end up buying too much home. Don't do that. If it gets too risky and it gets out of your 25 to 35% debt to income ratio budget, back out, don't go through with it, and don't overpay. You wouldn't believe how many people I talk to that later on regret and say that their home never felt like home because they overpaid or they bought the wrong thing because they got caught up in the glitz and glam of buying a home. They think it's the right thing, and then they get in and their neighbor sucks, or they have a barking dog in their backyard. There's a ton of different reasons why you might not be happy with your home. I know this isn't a mathematical principle or anything like that, but it's one of the best ways to determine if the home is right for you. It's follow your gut. Seriously, if it doesn't seem right, or if your wife or kid or boyfriend or whatever doesn't feel right about the house, there's something off, it might not be the home for you, and it might not be the price of the home for you. And so in this market, you have to be willing to walk away. It's gonna be the best. There's other homes out there. It might take longer, but it's perfectly fine. You'll find something. Just be willing to back away. You can absolutely buy a home in 2022 if you abide by some of the principles that we talked about today. Guys, I hope you got value out of this video. If you didn't, comment down below and let me know why. If you did, please comment down below and let me know, are you planning to buy a home in 2022, or do you have any other questions about buying a home? I can address those either in the comments or other videos. And guys, I don't just talk about mortgages, I also talk about personal finance, investing, and real estate. So if those things interest you, please hit that big red subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one.